Okay, today on part 5 we're going to be talking about doing the scanner rings, the beams, air cups, and side panels. So let's get set up and start the old slideshow. Get you all centered up here. And we'll turn off our blockhead so it's easier to talk. And maybe zoom in a bit. So what you're looking at here obviously is this would be the horizontal side piece, showing you how it fits on the Pursa. Kind of fills it, but there's room. It also has mounting holes. So here's a picture from the inside. It does print, as you saw, flat on the bed, but you do need supports. The supports run up to this ring part here and one column up to the center. Other than that, you don't need the supports. And now you can see these holes clear. You'll need to hold this onto the side of your blockhead mainframe and drill into your mainframe whatever size pilot hole you need for whatever screws you're going to use. I use some number 2 screws, so I just drilled a small hole and let them self-tap. Like so. This is before that other base piece existed, so it was easier just to set it on something and come in here with a drill and squirt some holes into it. It's painted here, but what you're going to need to glue on are these pieces which are going to hold the clear fins. This piece pokes in from the inside. This piece has a special curve that will match the curve of this, so there will be a front and a back one. You'll know when you put them on wrong because it'll be angling off in the wrong direction. It'll be fairly obvious. Of course, on this horizontal one, the fins face up. This is showing the motor mount and frame. This little frame piece is going to get glued in. The motor will actually be inside the cup. 2 screws holding it in place. Here's the rod that's going to turn the scanner rings. So it's going to fit in like this, top to bottom. So you'd basically glue it here and here and poke it in, make sure everything's moving freely. You would want to solder your wires onto the motor before you did that. Otherwise you'd end up having to unscrew it here and pull it back out and solder some wires on. You can see that inside of that one little piece I told you about pokes in from the inside, and the other gives you a tab to glue to. And so that's what the scanner ring is going to look like when it's in place. I think maybe back further this way. Let's go back here. Okay, so here the rings are in order to print them on an FDM printer without having to do a bunch of supports, it's split. So you'd basically print 2 of these and glue them together to form the ring. Now I suppose if you were doing them in your resin printer, you could join 2 of those together and print it as one on your resin printer. But it's easier to work out this way. You take those, and here you can see the seam on the bottom. I glued them together, and of course you'd want to sand them up before you gave them your nice chrome or aluminum paint job, whatever you want to go with. Here I am holding one right in front of the ear scanner that's on my actual Robby out in the robot hut for size scale. Hold it below it. It's kind of hard when you get closer to the camera or further away, things look different in size. They're basically very, very similar. The rings are the same. Really only the big difference would be on this mounting part. This is a little less hefty than I made on the CAD files for this. Plus there's a slight taper difference between the two. It's close. We're kind of maybe getting ahead of some things here, but that's for the beam lights, for your beam blaster. This first one I printed in white and then tried tinting it the blue color. This of course is a jumbo 10mm lead and a 39 ohm resistor which gets glued into it. I didn't end up liking the way that looked, so in the end I ended up printing all three of those just in a translucent blue filament, which looked a lot better. Okay, so this is where we just started a moment ago. And the motor, and now showing you where it went in. And here we are test fitting the scanner ring onto the end of the shaft. And now we're adding this cam onto the motor shaft. Had that one end still sticking out. You put a cam on there and a screw and use a micro switch. There'll be holes and everything sitting there. And this is going to give us our flasher control for the alternate flashing lights. You noticed how Robby's lights alternate from side to side, but they also alternate front to rear, so you do have to cross your wiring. And of course, these micro switches have what's called a C, which is your common terminal, and then they have an NO, normally open, and they have an NC, and normally closed. So if you take your C and make it, I think C's up here in this case, make it positive, for example, and both your LEDs, front and the back, have a common ground, that means they both still have a hot wire. And if you put one hot wire on one and one hot wire on the other, they will alternately flash as the switch switches between the normally open and the normally closed. So you can get your dual flashing from this cam setup. Showing you more how that looks. And here are the blaster beam ball things that I printed in the blue filament. And there they are with the LEDs glued into them. And here we are printing the other side. This would be the vertical. And you can see the little post piece we talked about poked in from the inside. That gives you something to help center this when you go to glue it on there. In the case of the vertical one, these two, your fins are going to aim out this way, not vertically, but out this way. And since they aim out this way, both these pieces are actually the same. There isn't a front and a rear, because the taper of this is going to be the same no matter which side you put that on. Like so. Here we're printing the parts to make the actual the metal aluminum looking part that the beam light goes into. And I do turn supports on that, not that these parts need it, but this front dish part does. It'll put supports on the back side, which won't be visible when you assemble it. This is assembling it in separate parts, which is best if you're doing it on an FDM printer, because these parts will come out much cleaner. I'll also provide a file on Thingiverse for this whole thing assembled as one piece. So if you're printing it on a resin printer, you don't have to fool with these supports, and you don't have to fool with all the separate parts. You can print it as one piece. So here are your separate parts. This is what's going to get glued into the ear cup part. Then you work your way up. They all glue one into the other, and the other's little tits where they all fit in together. And finally the dome part, which will give you an assembly like that. And there they are glued in place, with the lights glued in place as well. Just bring the wires through. Like I said before, take a positive from one of them to one, take a positive from the other to the other. You take your common positive, which actually will be the common positive for the motor too, so you end up with one positive wire. And then you have your ground from the motor, and you have the grounds from the LEDs all connected together. So you could power just this ear cup if you wanted. You'd have your horizontal scanner turning, and you would have your lights alternately flashing. This is going to be the vertical tube over on the vertical side now. And rather than painting this, I thought I'd just wrap it with some aluminum duct tape, which gives you an actual metal finish on the part. And I guess I'm just showing these in place because oh, right here. So here is the aluminum one glued in place onto the vertical. This little nubbin down here I just painted with some chrome paint to kind of match in. You kind of need this in place, glued in place, before you do the next step so you can line things up. Because the drive shaft that's going to drop in here, and it's going to fit on that motor, you're going to want to get this all lined up right to begin with. So the motor fits onto a piece like this. This piece is going to fit down to this hole. The shaft for the motor is up here. You can see these two screws hold it on there. You actually don't want to snug these screws down all the way. You just want to get them, you could go in tight and then back them off a quarter or half a turn. It just keeps the motor captive, but that way the motor can give you a little bit of play for lining up your shaft. Doesn't become hypercritical. Here we are looking at it from the inside, so you can see that there's a lip. That lip's going to help you center it in there. That shaft we talk about has a D slot in the end that's going to come and slide right down onto that motor. So this is going to fit in like that. And the shaft is going to come down and meet up like that. Once you know you're going to get everything lined up right, you can then glue it in place. So there's the shaft. You want to make sure that this all turns free and works free. In fact, even before you glue that part that I wrapped the metal tape around, the tube, the vertical tube, make sure that your shaft fits, because it's going to be easier to get in there and clean if there's anything wrong with your print job, a glob or something that might cause binding. Before you get a long shaft on there and have to look for a long drill bit, you know what I mean? Before that's on there, you could just reach in with an X-Acto knife if there was anything in here that would keep the shaft from turning freely. So make sure that that can all spin freely. So there it is, pushed all the way down, mating with the motor, like so. And now we're moving on to the clear earpieces. Now if you print on an FDM printer with clear, so-called clear filament, obviously it's going to come out as a milky color. But you can use this as a template and go to your local hardware store and just buy some light plexiglass or whatever you want that's clear plastic, and use it as a template or scribe around it and cut the other ones out. That's what I did here to get the clear ones. Again, I guess if you had a resin printer, you could resin print them in clear, but actually it would be stupid and a waste of resin and time. It's much quicker just to cut them out of plexiglass or something. Use the goop glue, the E6000 type stuff. Put a little on the ends of these, stick them down in the slots, and then, like you can see here, use some tape to hold them the way you want, and just let them sit and dry overnight, and then they won't go anywhere. Is that the end of the show? I think that maybe. Let's go back here. If I got anything else. That is the end of the picture show. What else can I tell you? I think that pretty much covers it. The files are on Thingiverse, or at least I hope they are. You never know with Thingiverse. And like I say, the beam piece can be printed either way. It can be printed as individual parts, or can be printed as one piece. Both files will be up there. I would start the whole process by printing. Let's go back. By printing the both end caps first. Get your horizontal and your vertical one. Get those printed. They're the biggest pieces that you're going to want to make sure that you can fit on your deal. So print those out first so that you know you can do it. Then go ahead and print out the scanner rings and glue those together. And from then on, just kind of follow the video. You shouldn't have any trouble. So step 6, the next video will just be what's left of the cosmetic pieces. Things like the air hoops and this panel that go there. Things like the piping and these pieces here. Just the cosmetic things to finish off this blockhead will be the last part on this segment of the build. And have fun.